The interview was published quietly in mid-January, but it landed with weight. Cardinal Raymond Burke was speaking to Edward Pentin, and the exchange sounded calm, measured, almost restrained. Nothing about it felt like an outburst or a provocation. Yet as the conversation unfolded, it became clear that Burke was describing something deeper than a routine Vatican meeting. He was pointing to a system at work, one that shapes how decisions are made and how voices are heard, often without drawing attention to itself. At the center of his remarks was the recent Consistory. On paper, a consistory is meant to be a gathering of cardinals for shared reflection, counsel, and discussion. In practice, as Burke described it, this one functioned very differently. It was not organized as a space for open exchange, where cardinals could speak freely and respond to one another. Instead, it followed a tightly managed structure. Discussions were broken into small groups. Topics were assigned in advance. Time was strictly limited. And when the cardinals finally gathered together in plenary session, there was no real debate at all. There was only a report read by the secretary summarizing what had already been said elsewhere. If you haven't subscribed, click on the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos like this, because what you're about to hear is not just news, it's a wake-up call for every heart that still believes truth should burn brighter than silence. Now grab your rosary, quiet your spirit, and let your heart listen, not just with ears, but with faith. Burke did not dramatize this. He stated it plainly. All discussion took place in small groups, and the general session consisted only of the secretary's report. That single sentence carried more meaning than it appeared to at first glance. Traditionally, the plenary session is the heart of such meetings. It is where differing views are aired, where concerns surface, where unexpected insights can emerge. Reducing it to a summary exercise changes its nature entirely. It turns a gathering meant for discernment into a procedural formality. The restrictions did not stop there. Even when cardinals were allowed to speak in the plenary context, their interventions were sharply limited. Each speech was capped at 3 minutes. Only 15 cardinals could speak in a given session. With more than 160 cardinals present, the mathematics spoke for itself. Most would not speak at all. Their silence was not chosen, it was built into the design of the meeting. This was not the result of disorder or lack of planning. On the contrary, it was the result of careful planning. Order was prioritized, but at the cost of genuine exchange. In the small groups, the same pattern held. Topics were not proposed by the participants. They were assigned. A framework was given, and that framework had to be followed. Again, Burke's language was neutral, almost technical, but the implication was clear. The conversation was guided from the outset. What mattered was not what individual cardinals believed to be most urgent, but what they were told to discuss. When that happens, collegiality risks becoming a performance rather than a reality. The structure remains, but its purpose shifts. It becomes a method for managing input rather than fostering shared judgment. Burke never used the word control, but the dynamic he described pointed in that direction. And it was at this point that the interview moved beyond a report on procedure and into something more fundamental. Burke began to speak about what he sees as the core responsibility of the papacy. He did not frame it as a complaint or an accusation. He stated it as a fact grounded in Catholic understanding of the Church. The appointment of bishops, he said, is one of the most important things a pope does. This was not a casual remark. In Catholic life, bishops are not administrators who simply keep local operations running. They are guardians of the faith in their diocese. They are responsible for teaching, governing, and sanctifying. Their influence shapes the Church for generations. Because of that, Burke insisted, the process of appointing them demands intense care. It requires time, attention, and serious study of each candidate's dossier. These decisions cannot be rushed or treated as routine. The emphasis on time was crucial. Burke spoke about the need for vigilance and careful evaluation, and the implication was unmistakable. When a pope's schedule is filled with constant travel, public appearances, and symbolic gestures, something else inevitably gives way. Burke did not say outright that this was happening, but the sequence of his remarks made the concern obvious. Structural decisions that determine the Church's future may be receiving less attention than they deserve. The interview reached its sharpest point when Burke quoted another cardinal. The line was stark in its simplicity. If the Church gets two things right, everything else will fall into place: the appointment of bishops and the management of seminaries. The statement was almost jarring in how much it reduced a complex crisis to two pillars. Yet that was precisely its strength. It cut through decades of debate and reform proposals and named what many believe lies at the root of the problem. Seen in that light, everything Burke had said about the consistory took on new meaning. The controlled discussions, the lack of open debate, the emphasis on process all pointed back to the same concern. Who is being formed, and who is being entrusted with leadership? Seminaries shape future priests. Bishops shape entire dioceses. If these two areas are mishandled, no amount of structural reform will address the deeper issue. Changes will remain superficial, unable to sustain the Church in the long term. Burke's words contained no personal attacks. He named no individuals. He did not question anyone's intentions. Yet the message was unmistakable. Form cannot replace substance. Synodality, if reduced to a technique for managing meetings, loses its meaning. Dialogue, if confined to narrow and controlled spaces, ceases to be real dialogue at all. What is left is an appearance of participation without its substance. Throughout the interview, Burke sounded less like a critic and more like a physician offering a diagnosis. He spoke as someone deeply familiar with the inner workings of the Roman Curia and the realities of ecclesial governance. Each sentence was careful, measured, and precisely because of that, heavy with significance. There was no raised voice, no dramatic language. Just a sequence of observations that, when taken together, revealed a serious tension at the heart of the Church's current life. That sobriety is what made the interview unsettling for many. It could not easily be dismissed as nostalgia or resistance to change. Burke was not calling for a return to some imagined past. He was recalling principles that have always been considered essential: real dialogue among pastors, careful discernment in leadership, and authentic formation of clergy. These are not optional extras. Without them, even the most solemn decisions risk being weakened from the start. The consistory, as Burke described it, became a symbol. Not of scandal or chaos, but of a deeper risk, privileging process over content, method over mission. When meetings are designed to manage outcomes rather than test ideas, something vital is lost. When silence is produced by structure rather than reflection, it carries a different meaning. And when authority operates without genuine exchange, unity becomes fragile. Burke's interview did not offer solutions or rally cries. It ended instead by leaving a question hanging in the air, unspoken but unavoidable. Who truly decides the future of the Church, and by what criteria? The description of the January consistory offered no comforting answer. It suggested a system efficient in form, but uncertain in depth. And because the words were so restrained, so carefully chosen, they lingered long after the interview ended, asking to be taken seriously by anyone willing to listen. If this message touched your heart, like this video and share your thoughts in the comment or comment Amen and stay with us. More Eucharistic stories, deeper reflections, and holy insights are on the way. May Christ in the Eucharist be your light, your rest, your truth. Amen.